Good morning, everyone. Casey here from Territory 3. A pleasure to be doing another webinar today. And today I'm actually joined by a very close friend, Aleks Dahlberg. Welcome, Alex, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
So obviously you would have seen in the title of this webinar conversation, it's a very important conversation that you've probably been seeing happening around the country, but it's around mental wellbeing. And that is particularly important in the workplace and especially for founders. So we're going to be going through a startup that Aleks is working on called Sahha, which is doing predictive analytics to help prevent or de-risk mental health challenges before they actually occur, rather than it being lagging indicators. So we're going to go dive through all of that. We've got a number of things to kind of talk to, both from our personal experiences of getting close to burnout or managing teams, because things get tough as a startup, right? You've got all sorts of different stuff going on and stresses in every direction. So it's going to be a very real talk, as we kind of like to do all the time. The other thing, as always, is if you've got any questions, do put them in the chat and we'll make sure to circle around and hit them as we go. But I guess, Aleks, when did we meet each other? It would have been probably 2015 at almost a startup weekend.
Yeah, so we met each other kind of twice. We met each other at the first startup weekend that I went to in 2015 down here in Dunedin. And I don't think we really communicated with each other. We probably had some like run-ins. It was a competitive environment, so I was probably like, fuck this guy, right?
Yeah, kicking your ass.
And then we met again, I think it was like late 2016 or something, or maybe 2017. I walked in here with my first or second or third kind of Dunedin startup project. And I was looking for like startup space to just work from. I met Aleks, your co-founder.
Oh, Aleks Robinson, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, he introduced us and then we got into the building somehow. And you guys gave us like one of those like small desks and put both of us on it, which was terrible. I need a lot of space, for all my screens and everything. So that was horrible. And we got to know each other there, I guess, just through common interests.
Yeah, and then since then you went on to build out Kit and take over the downstairs office with your team as you built that out.
Yeah, well, that was the real plan, was slowly take over the downstairs, which was a big inside joke with the team. Like we would just move the desks out further and further and further.
Literally, you guys would wait until like 11 o'clock at night, everyone had gone to bed, you're just still like hacking away, and you would just like move it forward an inch. Just to, like,
yeah, well, we had like Abdullah and those guys next door, and we'd always joke about like, hey, you guys better actually get some more team members on your projects before we take over the space. And every morning they would come in and it's a little bit further. Yeah.
So a long history together, close friend, and obviously very common interest in the startup world side of things. And now you're working on your next venture, which is Sahha, which is in the mental wellbeing space. Do you want to do a bit of a intro, maybe pitch towards what sort of stuff you're working on with that for folks listening?
Yeah, so Sahha, it evolved out of another project that I was doing, and we'll get to that at some other point. But basically, we're working on a bunch of technologies that help predict mental health outcomes for individuals. So right now we're focused on developing a mobile app and an API that will be consumed by some third parties. So that's the kind of focus at the moment. We're really interested in the predictive mental health space as opposed to what's currently out there, which we call like the reactive mental health space. So that's relying on traditional instruments and tools in order to measure a person's mental well-being or mental health. Things like the PHQ or personal health questionnaire or DSM, whatever you want to call them. Where they rely on questions in order to make an assessment, which is quite subjective and quite error prone, and we're more interested in looking at indicators that behavioral indicators that an individual might have that might indicate certain mental illnesses or mental well-being issues that person might have. And we're specifically looking at behavioral data, so how much time do you spend at home, how do you converse with other people, how many social interactions and stuff do you have. So data that you're kind of just collecting all the time by yourself, just by existing, and looking at how those behaviors might indicate issues potentially.
So if I play that back to you, the exhaust data from my activities that I might do in a working environment, maybe on Slack, maybe on different channels or stuff that I'm engaging with, would you kind of capture?
Yeah, it doesn't matter where it is. Yeah. So Slack might be conversational data that we look at. So, how are you interacting with other people? And, are you mainly having positive and negative interactions? Are you talking about yourself all the time, or are you, are you in kind of crisis mode frequently? Are you talking in absolutes? Are you swearing a lot? What emojis are you using? Even things like that, we're interested in. So really, like, things that you might not consider traits of one's mental health, we're looking at those things. Yeah.
And as a big theme to this as well is that if you can get ahead of a downward spiral early, it makes it infinitely easier to stop the downward spiral and actually go back in the upward direction.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing that we believe, and there's a lot of research saying that this is the case, is that if you you're looking at behavioral data, you're able to pick up on the patterns and the issues really, really early on, before the individual themselves might even notice an issue or anyone else, which is really, really, really kind of key here, because now you have this like tenfold or more technological difference to what's out there. You have a huge heads up on potential issues that might occur. And if you can mitigate the issues down there when they're kind of just starting, you're saving money, you're saving a whole bunch of stress for the individual, you're saving like just swaths of different things, right? And that's why it's really valuable, what we're working on, is the early alert system, or the early notification that there's an issue down here that is going to save all of this big problem. It's going to happen from like direct costs with treatment and therapies and stuff like that, to indirect costs like absenteeism or presenteeism, or the person just not performing well in the work environment, or not performing well as an athlete or a musician, or whatever it is that their thing is that's going to cause a problem, right?
Mm-hmm. And is there lots of different directions we can go from there? What was it that got you involved and passionate about wanting to contribute to the space?
Cool. So this is there's like a long story and there's a short story. So the long story is that I myself have always kind of struggled with mental well-being issues from a young age. I left home quite early on, struggled with kind of finding myself there, and those experiences there was kind of always something on the back of my mind, like, hey, this is a big issue. The treatments and stuff that I've had available to me just don't work. Now, fast forward going into 2016, I suffered a rather large head injury falling off a balcony here in Dunedin, and that kind of exacerbated all of those issues there. But one thing that did happen out of that was that I became pretty serious about what I was doing professionally with startups and stuff like that, and I dove kind of headfirst into that. It's a pretty good pun.
It's a really good pun.
Yeah. That was totally not intended at all. But like that experience there, it exacerbated a lot of the mental health issues that I had, and doing startups was again like another exacerbator. It's very stressful. You're prone to burnout. It's incredibly tense. You're constantly around these big numbers, billions of dollars, whatever. And so the issues I was having, they kept existing, right? And I thought I was particularly good at like kind of hiding those symptoms, because I didn't know how to deal with them. And when we raised money and I had a team and stuff like that, it was particularly like, it became like, oh well, I can't really let the mask kind of slip.
You've got to be the rock.
That's what I thought. Yeah. And it got to points along the way where we had massive issues in the company. There was a time where I remember running out of money, which was like one of the worst fucking experiences of my life, where I had to let the entire team go and then tell them like, there's no more work, and I'm going to go out and raise money, and then I'm going to try and save the company. Just give me like 2 months to do this. And I tried to do that, and I did raise some money, but like that period there, that was like just the fucking worst. Horrible experience. I mean, there's obviously worse things. There's worse things that happened to me in my life, but right there as a founder, that's like, you've tied your whole existence to like this company, and that's your persona. That's you. You are that thing, and all of a sudden that thing is like about to die. And coming out of that experience there, it just, once we came out of that, we raised more money and kept going. It just stayed. That was like it was like this mental scar that just kept opening back up. And then the mask started slipping, and people in the team started noticing, and people around me were like, "Hey, you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, sweet." And that's when I was kind of noticing, like, people know that I'm not good, and I don't know how to bridge that conversation at all. There's no way they can bridge it. So I'm just going to keep it going. And that was quite difficult. And then it kind of got to the point last year, midway through last year, and things started going on in the company. It was like the first time we'd landed on something. We pivoted a lot with the last business, and we landed on something that just started working. And at that point, I was done. I was burnt out completely. That I'd gone through the ringer enough times, and I was just like, shit, this is it. This is everything's going well for once. Like we've kind of found product market fit, and I'm done. And I remember turning to someone on the team at the time, like, you're going to take over the company, or I'm going to shut it down tomorrow, because I can't continue anymore. Like even though things are going well, that's it. Like if I continue, I'm just gonna it's going to be self-destructive, and the company will suffer from that. So we made the opportunity. I was going to leave. We made the decision. I was going to leave, and that was good. And that was the best decision I kind of made. And then from that, this kind of whole time, I'd always been thinking about like this issue and how there should be a solution for this. And there was different points in the past. I should have covered that, where I always thought about ideas around like, how do I bridge the things that's going on in the company, particularly with the founders and the team, to the investors and the other stakeholders, and even the other team members. How do I bridge that conversation? Because I can't have it, but it needs to happen. But I can't do that. Like, I'm just not, I don't know if I'm like mentally equipped to like do that. It's in my blood to like hold the mask up. And which is the wrong thing. It cuts
against the grain of what you feel you have to do as a founder, which is to be the strong person that no matter what happens, you've got some positive way forward. You'll push through no matter what it is. And sometimes, you're just not okay. And to have that conversation is almost to go towards. It feels like you're going towards a defeatist attitude, even though that's not at all. You're trying to. You need the help, but it's fucking tough.
Yeah, and everything you see out there around being a founder is like, these crazy people that just like head first, they work like 27 hours a day and like just shut the fuck up. Like that's not the reality. The reality is it kind of sucks, and it's bloody hard, and not many people are willing to have that conversation. I certainly wasn't. I was like, I'm one of the strong men, like the other guys, like they're just bad founders. Do they not read this stuff online about how you're supposed to work 38 hours a day? They don't read that. Like that's the instructions. That's the wrong way to go about it, right? I started reading stuff online last year, like because I was kind of exploring like, what kind of investors, like how do you approach investors about founding mental health? And there was this big movement about like the mindful investor, which I quite liked, where a bunch of VCs over in the States started seeing this as a massive issue because they dealt with, there was horrible stories. There was some stories where like, they invested millions of dollars into these companies that they're going like brilliantly, but the founder, one of the founders was just like burnt out. They were done. Didn't matter how well the company was going. These are companies like hundreds of millions, billions of dollar valuations, right? And then just tons of customers everywhere, like absolutely creaming it. But one of the founders just never, like they were just burnt out, and they didn't see the success. And there was times where like stories where like one of them killed themselves or something, and the whole company had to shut down from that because the whole top level was just destroyed from that like suicide or that event. that it just wrecked the entire company. And these investors out there were realizing like, hey, you know, there's a core issue with what we're doing and the mission that we've tasked some of these guys with. You know? So they started looking at something they were calling like human capital as well. They have the monetary capital that invest in the company, and now they want to build like human capital as well. Having like, you know, strong, resilient founders, but not in that traditional sense of the strong person, but like in the other sense of like these people are able to open up, they're able to express the issues that they're experiencing with their investors and with their teams, and we're able to provide support there and do our best to make sure that these people are able to perform for the long term, for, you know, for their own sake as a fund, but for themselves as well, and for the team and for the business, and actually, you know, like make it more likely of having success for everyone. I digressed a little bit there. What was the question? We're talking about how do we get to Sahha. So after leaving the last company, I remember, you know, after having hard conversations with people who had backed us and stuff, that I'm leaving, and then telling them that it's still going. You know, that was important for me that the company continued. Really, really important, because, you know, I had friends in the business, and there was investors that, you know, that I became friends with all of them. You know, it was important for me that this thing kept going, and that I didn't lose their money and all that kind of stuff. So luckily, we managed to keep that going. You know, no thanks to everyone on the team, really. I mean, I left, but like that they did really well at keeping it going, keeping the whole thing alive, and it's actually done a lot better now, you know. And anyway, a lot of people have told me like take a break for a while, which was probably the wise thing to do. But it lasted not very long.
How long did it last?
Probably about like a week and a half, 2 weeks before I was like, fuck this, right? This is a problem that needs to be solved, and I'm going to do it because I have the energy to do it, and I'm like filled with the emotions of wanting to do it. So this is like the best time apparently to just like go full steam ahead. So
it was Solace.
Yeah. So I started working on something called Solace, which evolved out of another idea that I had like a couple of years back about creating this kind of like founder or like startup to investor kind of bridge thing, where, you know how you have like investor updates and all that kind of stuff. It was like a mechanism to constantly have that going. And then one of the key things was like mental health. So like checking in with the investors and vice versa and stuff like that, so that, you know, that whole idea of kind of mental human capital and all that kind of stuff. So I started working on that, and I called it Solace, which I still think is a really cool name, and basically started applying for accelerators. We can get onto that topic kind of soon, because I was like, I want to hit the ground running with this thing. I know what to do. Like, I think I have a pretty good chance of getting into an accelerator, like right off the bat with nothing more than like a spreadsheet and an idea. I remember sending you like, not spreadsheet, pitch deck. And I remember sending you like the early versions of that. Yeah, like really like applying everywhere, trying to like run through the idea and stuff like that. And I came to this idea that was like, you know, it was going to be this bridge between founders and investors, tool about mental health, which is a massive problem. You know, like getting more into that issue, I saw that like, you know, founders compared to like, if you average out the you know, work that everyone else does compared to like a founder or whatever, they're 4 times more likely to fall into like different kind of psychotic disorders, or like depression and anxiety and stuff like that. They're far more likely to like have suicidal behavior or even commit suicide as well. Like, it was like really fucking horrible, the shit I was reading. I was like, wow, this is actually a massive issue. And no wonder, you know, no wonder it's a big problem. These people are constantly surrounded by just like fantasy and reality that just don't line up. And for most people, you know, it's like you're talking about this, and the reality is just like smashing your head against the wall. And then when you go to talk about it with other people, you're talking about the fantasy part.
Yeah.
It's just like just.
And at the same time, what you talked about before, where your whole identity gets like intrinsically attached to your startup. And if your startup isn't succeeding towards the fantasy that you're pushing towards, you feel like a failure. You feel like,
Oh, yeah.
like Casey is a failure or Alex is a failure, not that necessarily your startup isn't succeeding. And it's
no, you become your startup. Like you work on it long enough, and like that's you.
Yeah.
You know, you don't really have like another kind of person. That's 90% of your personality. The rest of it is just the thing that goes to sleep and eats dinner.
Someone will ask you, like a friend will ask you how you're doing, and immediately you're like, yeah, the startup's going great. What?
Things are going well. We're raising millions of dollars. Yeah. And they look on your face and they see like the bags and stuff, and they're like, yeah, right.
Pretty much.
Yeah, Alex is going great. That's him. You know, his suit's not ironed. I find it hilarious. Yeah. Okay, where do we get to? Solace. Yeah, I applied for some. I turned this idea into this thing, and then I had a call with Dave Moss here in New Zealand, and I kind of told him about the idea, and then I think he was looking around. I don't know what he noticed, but he noticed that I was in I think he noticed that I was in the Otago Polytech at the time, and he's like, what building are you in right now? And I'm like, oh, I'm in the Otago Polytech. And he's like, go and talk to one of the directors and see if they have like this issue just with like staff in general and bridging mental well-being stuff. And I was like, yeah, it's a pretty good idea. Why didn't I think of that? It's obvious, like startup 101. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna walk off because the office here wasn't open. So I was just kind of stealing all the Wi-Fi from over there, and that became my office. I walked over and had a conversation with them, and they were just all over it. They were like, this is perfect. You know, we've been struggling with this. There's all these different fucking pulse check-in things and that we're trying to get solved all the time, but no one is just like focusing on that one thing around, you know, having people tell us about their mental well-being, you know, to improve all sorts of issues that we're having with like absenteeism and all this kind of stuff with their staff and people getting burnt out, and even the students as well. Like they were like, you know, we want to know which times of the year that students are like struggling the most because we've got all these like well-being resources, and what do we do with them if we're just like blindly throwing them out there and saying, hey, there's this and this on this day, this seminar on this day. Like then it was completely untargeted. And I'd say most businesses, big organizations are like that. Like they just have like these poor HR people with a budget that have to just like spray and pray the resources out there and just hope people pick up on it. And we're providing them a tool where you could target those resources a lot more effectively and actually get a lot more stuff out of them. And this is pre us looking at behavioral data. So we were still going like, how can we use forms? We were looking at sentiment. So looking at sentiment of language and like Slack channels and emails and stuff like that to try and pick up on indicators, but we weren't as advanced as we got to now. So anyway, I pitched this idea to Antler. I think the idea changed because there's like 3 interviews that I had to have. Antler's a VC accelerator over in Australia. And I pitched the idea to them to try and get into that accelerator, which I thought was quite an interesting structure. Like I wanted to find co-founders and stuff like that. And they provided like this kind of weird like startup builder environment where, you know, you've got people that have ideas and you've also got people that just have like skill sets and all this kind of stuff. And they could all, you could kind of mingle in there and hopefully find other co-founders and stuff like that. I remember when I was pitching it, the idea changed like in the interview process like 3 times. So as soon as the next person interviewed me, they're like, oh, so you're working on this? And I'm like, oh no, I was last week, but now it's now it's kind of like this.
Moving quickly.
Yeah. I think they probably saw that as like me moving quickly, but really it's just because I hadn't settled on any idea. And I got into that, so I was pretty stoked with that, and that came with like, you know, that I like their structure because they don't fund you right at the start. Well, they fund you as a founder right at the start, but they don't fund your business. They give you some money to kind of support yourself during the first half of the program, and then all the businesses kind of pitch to the midway through that they've let in, and the businesses that are formed in there, and then they fund you with 190,000 Australian dollars halfway through the process. It's a really good structure because it allows them to allows people to filter out, is this right for me? Maybe they can leave and there's nothing that they're kind of beholden to. And then from there, it allows them to kind of filter out people that maybe are like time wasters or not interested, and take the kind of good solid investments halfway through, which I quite like that structure. I think that should be replicated a little more, because they're supporting the founders while they get to that middle point, which is great. So allow them to like work on this full time and just focus on that. And they give them like a stipend, and then if they're still keen on progressing, they can pitch to the what do they call it, investment committee thing halfway through.
And get more money. I like that because it's kind of in the direction of actions speak louder than words. Like lower the barriers for people to get their foot in the door, so then they can actually prove themselves, but there's no massive commitment on either side. And then because there's always going to be startups that put together really good applications to things, but the execution sucks. They're just not committed. They're not actually doing the work, whatever. But then you can have other startups that the applications aren't the shiniest applications in the pile, but man, they move quick. They do really good work. They get customers. They add value, and then they go and do amazing things. And if your application process right at the start is binary, you're in or you're out.
You've cut out there, Casey.
Unfortunately, there's people that get it shouldn't, and there's people that don't get it should.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
gigabit speed internet.
You're a big proponent of that. I think I remember when I first came down going to those the competition, the gigabit competition.
Gigatown.
Gigatown, that's the one. Yeah, you're all over that. Neck and neck between Nelson, where I'm from, and Dunedin.
Good times.
Moved down here anyway. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you got through to
Antler, and during Antler, like there's all these kind of hackathons you do at the start to kind of meet other people, and it's really fun. The first few weeks are basically just like team building stuff, which is really cool. You get to know other people, you get to see who you're going to work well with and all this kind of stuff, and hopefully maybe even find co-founders for your project. And I was dead set on doing Solace, and I was out there trying to find a co-founder, and I got a message in Slack one day from this guy Doug, who was like, "Hey, we should meet up because apparently we're working on like similar projects." And I'm like, "Oh, it's this fucking guy, like whatever project he's got, mine's better." And we meet up, and like me and him just like click straight away. We're like a house on fire. He's talking my language, I'm talking his language, and I'm like, "God damn, this guy's good. This guy's really good." And I had a couple other people I was working with, not in the program, and they were helping me kind of build solid stuff out. I was like, "Fuck, this guy's like, he's really good." And Doug, he had this idea, which is it was called Sahha. So he's the one that came up with the name. And he was looking at, he comes from this like ad tech background. He was the global head of marketing for digital marketing for Qatar Airways. And he'd been using like this ad technology that would like pick up on behaviors and stuff online and then target ads. And he has this whole thing, if he's listening to this, I'm going to butcher it, sorry, Doug, where he's like, one of the bad guys on the Death Star, using this technology for like an evil purpose. And now all of a sudden he wants to be like Luke saving the princess. So using that technology, but for like a good reason. I don't know. Whatever. Doug is going to kill me for that one. Anyway, so he had that like kind of perspective. He's just like, how can we use the technology that I was using to actually do something good? Mm-hmm. And I really liked that, because what he was prompting was like this thing that is applicable to everyone, not just organizations. It was like a way that you could use this technology for like just good right across the board. And we kind of left that conversation. In my head, I was already sold. I was like, okay, this is the guy that's gonna help me build this company, and I'm hoping that he was in the same. in the same kind of like, he was probably the same mindset as well. And for me, I was like, this doesn't make sense to have both of these companies trying to tackle what is essentially the same problem in this program, because they're going to have to choose one. Like, this is we both have pretty good approaches, and they're going to have to choose one of these things. Like, there's no doubt about it that we're going to go on to get the funding. At least we thought. And I got back in another conversation with him, and I was kind of sold there. And then we had another hackathon thing where we were both kind of in that group, and we had other people in there. And I had people that I'd talked to previously about my idea in there, and I was basically just like trying to find all the flaws of my idea and why I shouldn't pursue that thing, and have them tell me, these are the things that you have not thought about, Alex, and this is the reason why you need to team up with Doug. And it was the same with Doug as well. And then at the end, I remember one of them, Jess from the program, she's just like, okay, it's kind of obvious what you guys need to do, right? And I was like, yeah, we need to team up on this. And yeah, we ended up teaming up, and like we had this kind of, you have these like team, but you know, you'd have to talk to the program facilitators about like the team that you formed. And we talked to them about it, and they're like really happy because they really like both Doug and I individually, and they were stoked that we'd kind of found each other on the program and joined up, because it was going to be a hard decision to not fund one of us, or like whatever potentially, right? And yeah, that's how we formed it, and from there, like, you know, we've just. It was one of those bonds you find where you just get on with each other like instantly, like you know, the relationship just like worked. And he's a lot older than me. He's like 30 years older. And when his wife watches this, she's gonna kill me. Fun to meet her. So I always joke about him being real old. He's not. He's older, but he's very young.
Not 30 years older.
Yeah, he's so fucking immature. I have to tell him to like, hey, this is a
That's
serious
from you as
well. Yeah, and yeah, we teamed up. Like, it took us 2 attempts to get through the IC there. We had a tragedy kind of happen.
IC being the investment committee.
Yeah, the investment committee. We had a tragedy kind of happen right at the start of our formation. In Doug's family, there was a family tragedy there. So we just had like this month lag where it was like, fuck, you know, what's going to happen? And they kind of gave us a second chance to get through that IC and prove like there's some commercial intent here and all this kind of stuff. And we went out and got that. We proved commercial intent. We went and found like scientific advisors that could back up all the stuff that we're talking about, and really started making ground there. And they led us through and decided to fund us. You know, it's taken ages to like sort out all like the company documents and stuff, because Doug's Canadian and I'm a New Zealander and the company's Australian, so it's a real shit show trying to sort everything out.
Nice.
And
so you got the funding, you pushed through, and you got it over the line.
Yeah, we got it over the line, and really, like, we've had this kind of flood of interest ever since, because while this has been like a thing that has been well researched in the scientific community and academia, right? Like looking at behavioral data to predict mental health outcomes, no one was really looking at it commercially. So people were seeing what we were doing and going, that's actually kind of interesting, because everyone's using forms and stuff to predict mental health outcomes, or look at mental health outcomes and stuff like that. They're asking people questions, and those people can fake those questions. And they can answer them in whichever way they want. There's all sorts of different forms, and there's more or less battles against those forms. This one's better than that one, and so on and so forth. But no one's just looked at like the pure behavioral data. This is a real indication of like how that person is behaving, and we just need to align that with like characteristics or traits of potentially bad mental health.
And is there also an element that like some people are a bit more bubbly in their behavior than others, where some might be a bit more, say, negative? So you have like almost local like minimums and maximums of what you'd expect within the way someone
There's
interacts?
all sorts of different things. You might have someone that's totally bubbly, and underneath that, they're actually struggling.
Yeah,
it's really, really, really quite difficult to pick up on some of these things, and we have to look at things in so many different angles and so many different ways. And we're doing like a lot of research. We're researching with like a bunch of different researchers at Otago University, hopefully very soon an institute in Australia, and a place in Dortmund, Germany as well, because it's really important you get these things right, because it's very, very, very complex, and it's a very hard problem to solve. And then that's why we're doing it, right? Like this is a really hard one. And that's what makes it kind of interesting to a lot of people, that especially like investors and potential customers and stuff like that, is that they're like, well, this definitely hasn't been done. And if they can do it, then it's really, really, really exciting.
So what do you see as like your first roadmap of being able to kind of get this out there and test with people? And no doubt you're kind of already doing things kind of more internally and manually, but what sort of chasm do you have to jump from having the level of confidence of research? Because I could also imagine that the research is never going to stop, right? Like you could genuinely launch this and you could have super solid research, and in 20 years time, you'll still be bringing in new data and feeling like, shit, were we doing that 10 years ago?
Oh, we're going to be consistently doing this, and that's kind of one of our product pathways I mentioned there, is having an API that's available for certain customers to consume. We need to consistently be researching this in the background, and that's what we're working on right at the moment. We've done some preliminary tests. We're about to do more. We're about to do more with some technology that we've built. It's extremely important that we can rule out all the false positives and false negatives. We don't want to be telling someone that they're depressed when they're not, and vice versa. That's pretty damaging. And this is why we're trying to steer away from like diagnosis and stuff like that, and more into like, hey, this is an indication of an issue. And now
you need to examine that. You're like in a way that you apply heuristics as the actual team or the actual people, opposed to like, you're not trying to solve and say this is the problem. You're saying you're essentially you're flagging and identifying that there are health risks in this area, and now it needs.
We're saying like, you're at risk of developing depression. We're not saying that you're depressed. We're saying you're at risk of developing it. Here is the things that we've picked up on that are indicating that risk to us. And present them to that, and then also present them different treatment and intervention pathways as well, which again have to be validated pretty heavily. There's all sorts of things there, from social support to CBT, other therapies and stuff like that. There's all sorts of things we can lean on, but we're still working with researchers on getting like, ones like e-health interventions, and so getting some of them really solid, that we can present to people who are potentially struggling, or we notice that are struggling. I mean, this is such a sensitive space, and I think that's potentially why people have avoided it, is because the risk of you fucking up is pretty high. That the outcomes are pretty high if you the potential damages can be pretty high.
But then on the other side, right, you've got the other situations like what we see with Mike King, where if there's not enough action being taken, that's also equally damaging. And that's like the whole thing that Mike King is pushing, is that there's not enough happening in this space. So like it almost feels like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But you can't not take action. But it's a case of how do you like find what's the best way that we can identify things and work together and try and improve, but be super fucking real on that we're not going to get it right, and that we need to not be like super prescriptive. And then just continuously evolve and improve the way we approach this.
Well, at the end of the day, something has to be done. Like there's no doubt about it. You have to be doing stuff. And not doing anything or relying on the same tools is just not progress. And we live in a world now, right, where we can create new things, and there is new approaches to solving these issues. So, like, just standing around doing nothing, or not, you know, in the government here's case, like not spending the money or not giving the money out, or like who knows where the money's even gone, right, or whatever the issue is, that's not good enough. Now, you can get, if the big one that's being talked about now is like youth suicide and stuff like that. And this isn't just a New Zealand problem; it's a global problem, and nothing's really being done about it because it's a hard thing to try and confront, especially if you're a government. You know, you've got the women, the people there who are going to, you know, be looking at you under a microscope, right?
And even it's hard to confront, but it's even hard to identify. Like
yeah.
what you were talking about before about like you can have bubbly people that deep down are suffering. I've lost a handful of friends to suicide, and the trend that I've seen consistently through it, it's the people that you would not expect. That on the surface they're just like, they seem happy, they seem like they've got their shit together. They seem like they're in a good place, relatively speaking, considering all the shit people go through as a human being. And then all of a sudden, just out of the blue, things happen. So it's such a hard thing to identify and confront. So it's a tough situation.
Oh, it really is. And going more into that, like a lot of the time when people are struggling, they stop opening up about it, or they stop telling people about the issues. They just freeze up. And this is really kind of core to what we're doing as well. If we can still have a look at the behaviors of that individual, they're going to indicate that beyond the external things that they're telling people about, because they're going to shut those off, then we can still try and help them. It's a huge issue. I mean, like over in the States, like suicide has killed more people in the military over there than combat has in the past like 20 years. More people have died. You know, there's the Iraq, Afghanistan, pretty recent conflict of theirs. More people have died, like probably 3 or 4 times more from suicide in the military than died in combat from those conflicts, which is totally fucked. They have a similar issue over in Australia. And no doubt they've probably got a similar issue here, though our involvement in those conflicts was a lot smaller. But, you know, like that says something, and that's just ridiculous. It's scary. You have a similar problem here, like, you know, they're in combat situations. What about the people who are committing suicide at like tertiary education here? You know, and people are kind of scared to look at that as well. It's like frightening. And, you know, it's hard to touch, because as soon as you start getting involved, like you've got to try and show something. It's easier for people not to get involved. Yeah.
Unfortunately. And like, I mean, there's that whole terminology around, it's escaped my mind. Phraseology of it, but imposter syndrome. There we go. There's imposter syndrome going into any startup or anything that you're doing as well. And I could imagine within like the mental health space, it probably feels even twice as much, because it's like even trying to make an impact on it, immediately there's question marks that probably go to you as a person on why are you qualified to talk about this, because it's such a touchy subject. But and it's because, as you say, it's frightening. It's people know we don't want to get it wrong, but at the same time, stagnation and not trying to do anything isn't the right answer either. So it's honestly, man, power to you and kudos that you're persevering and pushing ahead to try and positively impact how we deal with this. Do you think, like, obviously you're playing very much in the predictive analytics space. Do you feel that it's largely going to be towards, like, by getting people in the know early, that is where the biggest impact that you'll have is that there will be so many people that before they even get to those dark stages, you can get them help? Like, what's actually, I guess what I'm saying with that is, what's it look like once you identify within a team that there's all these people, that these flags are coming up? And I know you said there's things you can lean on, but could you unpack that a little bit more?
So you're talking about interventions and what can kind of be done there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to what I was talking about with Solace, there's redirecting wellbeing resources and stuff that already exists. This is within organizational products that might be created from Sahha. There's better direction of those resources, and a much more healthier way for the individuals to receive them. In a way that's like anonymous, that they can feel comfortable consuming those things. There's better direction of resources from EAPs or employee assistance programs as well that a lot of companies have available to them. For individuals as well, there's things we're hoping to prompt social support and stuff like that, which is a really effective means of combating early depression issues as well, just at that very early stage. Having simple conversations and prompting simple conversations with friends and family. That there has solved a lot of lives.
Difference.
Yeah.
We've had lots of conversations on this. Is that like the meaningfulness of having relationships with people in itself gives you fortitude against the struggles that you go through in life. On just having a friend you can talk to, a family member you can talk to, or whoever.
That's a really important one that we're trying to because if we can pick up on early depression signs, then we can start prompting those conversations when the person who is experiencing the issue is actually comfortable having them. It's really hard to get those conversations happening later down the line. Like I was saying with my own experience there, like as soon as I was in the depths of burnout and anxiety and stuff like that, I couldn't talk to anyone about it. There's just no way to even start the conversation. And most people that we've talked to have been in that same level, like more in the moderate kind of stages there. That's when they start struggling to open up. So if we can capture them down there when they're able to open up, that's like a super, super effective means of overcoming the issue, is having them talk.
So here's a question for you, Alex. What about, say, I don't know, 6 months before you really started going towards that burnout side of things? If you had, say, a Sahha or a tool that could have helped you catch it, for the folks that are listening, a lot of them are founders that are running startups where they're in that identity of their startup as them, and they need to be the rock, and they need to be like super strong and kind of persevere forward. What can you do, and did you do, or could you do, if you know that you're at risk, or because we all have this underlying sense, I think, when we're not okay, and it's easy to mask that and kind of push on ahead, and then you become numb to that, and it becomes your new norm if you go in that direction. But what can you do if you do start catching it, or what are your lessons that you do differently?
I would say is like step out in the environment that you're in. To take a top-down look at, particularly if you're involved in startups, is take a top-down look at potentially the situation that you're in. You're out there pitching, your startup's consumed your kind of life. Zoom out from that and just look at how kind of ridiculous the stresses that you're involved in really are, and look at the things that are stressing you out. Look at how potentially small they actually are, when you're looking at them from above, and just take a step back and breathe a bit. Reach out to other people that are outside of your startup circle, and talk to them, and get involved in activities with them that aren't just talking about pitch decks and customers and this and that all day. Have other conversations that are outside of the thing that is kind of causing you the issues. Talking to therapists is great as well, and setting up ways in which you can change behaviors. That's very, very useful, particularly if you're involved in when you have this kind of startup mindset and you're quite stubborn with your routines and the things that you do. It's probably a very, very good idea to talk to someone about making some behavioral changes that get you out of that routine that's causing issues. And again, going back to the social support thing, just talk to your friends, open up a bit more, be real if you can at the time. One thing that helped me a lot was actually just starting to be real about the situation of startups, and joking about how funny some of the things are, and taking the piss out of you're constantly talking about the big numbers and all this kind of stuff. Just find some of the humor in it as well. Because you want to be so serious with startups and stuff the whole time, but if you didn't know what startups were, and you're looking in, you'd just be like, oh, there's fucking people. You know, look at it from their lens, and you see the humor in it as well. And that's, I found that kind of relieving. Just looking at the ridiculousness of a lot of the situations and a lot of what you're stressing out over, you know, it's not particularly a big issue, and realizing that the thing that you might care so deeply about and stress out over and have nightmares about, or whatever it is not actually too much of a big issue when you're looking at it from above and going, yeah, you know, that form that is causing me so much havoc, really, like, it's not too much of a big issue. I'm not an expert in creating the treatments and the interventions here, but I can tell you about things that I found that
lived
work.
experience.
Yeah, and you know, but there are some things that, you know, they have a lot of evidence for, and that's social support, CBT, behavioral changes, routine changes, and stuff like that. There's other ones that are very interesting to a lot of people, you know, meditations and yoga and stuff like that. Really, really, really good as well. I struggle to practice meditation, but I've been getting into yoga a lot. And I find that kind of completely takes me out of that busyness. You know, you always feel like you have to do something when you're an entrepreneur. And I do the hot yoga one. So I'm trapped in a room that's like sweaty and really hot. And I know I can't go anywhere. So I just kind of have to deal with the fact that I'm in this room. And then, you know, feel the pain and try and find enjoyment in that as well, which is kind of sadistic. I like it. Yeah, just getting getting yourself out. I do climbing as well. That's another thing. Like, I have something in my life, climbing and music, where I do those things, and when I'm in those states, I'm just focused on that, and everything else doesn't matter to me. And those sort of things, you know, like, I don't care about my startup when I'm on the rock climbing wall. I don't care about it when I'm making techno or playing music. Yeah.
And I guess the key there, because I remember I was talking about this a few years ago, on why rock climbing works so well for you, because I think I came out that time and we did a little bit together. And it's that, like, when you're reaching, or you got to do a dyno or something, like, you've got to be fully present. Your mind isn't kind of, because this is what happens when you're doing like something that's, say you go for a walk. While walking is really, really good, and I highly encourage it. Like, it's so easy to go for a walk and still be completely in the zone of thinking about your startup, right? So you're not actually getting that mental respite from the thing that always has your mind captivated. Whereas when you're doing something that like fully requires your attention, you have to stop thinking about it to focus on the present. And that's where that break comes, and that's where that kind of recharging happens.
Oh yeah, rock climbing is a perfect example of that. Like, if you're not focused on the rock climbing wall, you're fucking dropping.
You're gonna fall.
You can't screw up.
If there was one habit in your life that I took away, what would have the most impact?
Habit. Don't trust my habits. That would be a habit to take away. Don't do what I do. I don't know. Like, just find it like another hobby that consumes you. Find something that you love, and it doesn't matter if anyone else doesn't like the fact that you do that thing. Just find something else that's not startups that you're like, you have 100%, you have the same level of energy for. That's super, super important. Like, if you're a founder, I guess it's because it's founder relevant, right? Like, find something that is not, that's another person, like, that can add to your personality, that's not just like, you're the founder of this fucking company and that's all that you talk about. Talk about something else.
Yeah, and try your best in
like,
those.
do another
this is
thing.
super tough, but like in those situations, like you're rock climbing, you're doing your X activity, do your best to not talk about your startup. It's super hard to do. Like, it's the go-to thing that you gravitate towards talking about.
And be around people that really don't give a shit about your startup. I think that's another good thing. Like, I've got a great group of friends, and I don't know if many of them are actually interested in what I do, and that's a good thing, because the things that I like doing with them are not startup things, and I don't really like talking about my startup stuff with them, because that's my other thing that I deal with. And with them, I like to do the rock climbing, I like to do the music, and that consumes me when I'm with them, or with myself doing those things as well. Like, that's a really good balance to have, is something that you can 100% focus on that is not the startup thing, it's another thing. And I think that's just in general life. Like, if it's not particularly even startup related, like, if You know, if you're like obsessed with being a doctor, like find something else that's not medical related. Just do another thing as well. Yeah, I don't know if that's good advice, but yeah.
Well, I think the other piece in there that becomes super important is like with startups, or whether you're studying to be a doctor or whatnot, like you go through the highs and you go through the lows, right? And if all your identity is tied up into one topic or one category, when you're going through your lows, your whole life is going through a low. Whereas if you
if you hit a speed bump, yeah, exactly. Like if you hit a speed bump and that's all you're doing, you're gonna feel it a lot worse. There ain't a backup plan. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas you could be having a shit week with your startup, but rock climbing's going good, and like it puts, as you said before, it kind of puts things in perspective, and it just allows you to kind of look at things without being so attached to that the granular, this didn't go right, or whatever.
Be a bit more stoic.
Be stoic indeed. Alex, we're just about at time, so looking to wrap up. If any folks have questions, now would be the time to ask. Just a couple of questions from my side, Alex. What are your next steps with back talking about startup Sahha?
Right now we're raising a little bit more money. I don't think we'll ever stop raising. We've just employed a person last week. We're about to employ 2 more. More developers. Yes, because there's a lot of development work happening. If anyone out there is interested in getting a job, then please get in touch with me. And
are you looking for a particular
iOS, Android developers, ideally C#, if you're interested in joining our backend team, ASP.NET Core, AI people as well, really interested in talking to you. You know, people that are like super good at mathematics and algorithms and creating kind of models and ways that we can assess big swaths of data. Please get in touch as well. Clinical psychologists, get in touch. Anyone interested in mental health, please get in touch. Content writers, get in touch as well. So next steps, continue raising, onboarding some more employees. We've got a few milestones we need to get to. We've got one potential customer that will be utilizing both our API and our app and integrating that into a big bit of software they have. I can't talk too much about it, but it's a super, super exciting project that is going to, I hope, help a lot of people. And it'll be great to be involved with that. Hopefully we can reveal more about that in the future. People that have mental wellbeing apps and things that they're creating that would like to utilize some of the technology that we're building and integrate with us, please also get in touch. You know, if you have some wellbeing app or mental health app and you want to start looking at how you can use certain data points from that app to make analysis on your users earlier on and you know, help them in different ways and differentiate from your competitors, you know, we'd love to talk. And the next steps is like we're taking things kind of one step at a time, but also looking out quite far in the future about where we need to be. But yeah, right now we're focused a lot on building, a lot on raising more rounds. We're going to do a larger round next year as well. Yeah, I don't know.
Cool. I guess the final question would be,
cut out on the final
any
question.
closing thought you'd leave them with?
Um,
Any final thoughts for Founders Sahha?
I don't really have too many like kind of final thoughts or advice or anything like that. You know, I'm still new to this, like probably most of the people listening are as well. I haven't had like any huge successes or anything, but make sure you're doing your life's work. I really feel like the project that I'm working on right now is my life's work. And I think like that makes me kind of happy knowing that I'm involved in that, and that does, you know, really helps my own personal mental health and kind of found a journey and gives me like a really good sense of purpose. I don't think I felt that as much with my last company or other projects. You know, this one has been the one where I'm like, well, I think this is the one that I'm like super, super proud to be involved with. And I hope that other people who are doing a startup feel the same way about that thing that they're doing right now. Evaluate it and look at it and go, is this the thing that I want to spend the next 10 years doing or more? And it's kind of a confronting thing to leave people with. I think it's an important thing to ask yourself, is this your life's work? And another thing is, do I have something outside of startups that can consume me with as much passion as the startups as well? Yes.
Aleks, thanks so much for jumping on. I know you've got heaps on the go with obviously doing your raise and pulling this all together, but really appreciate you jumping on, getting vulnerable as well and having real talk, because I mean, there's founders that are listening to this that absolutely go through these sorts of pains and challenges, right? So being able to hear a non-glossy, non-bullshit answer of actually going through that, I think's super helpful. So thank you for being able to jump on and talk to us.
I encourage more people to do it as well. Like, let go of the bullshit kind of startup persona that you might have adopted, or like that you think you have to adopt, or something like that. And it's such a relief to just be able to talk realistically to people. And I do that with like potential investors and stuff as well. You know, and I always joke when I do presentations and all that these days, just because I've been like, look, I mean, I'm going to talk seriously about what I'm doing, but I'm not, you know, I'm not going to like gloss over it or try and promote some unrealistic vision. This is what we're doing. This is who I am. This is who Doug is. This is who our team is. Whatever. You know, so freeing.
Super freeing. All right, my friend. Enjoy your stunner, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Kia ora.